brought it up an excellent point, Alan. Absolutely excellent.
Okay.
ETs have some sort of connection or control within our government, and not just our government. I think other governments on this planet. I think you hit that spot right there.
I was a counterintelligence officer for the Air Force Office of Special Investigation. I tried to keep the programs secret. If a person saw a classified aircraft in and around Area 51, it was our job to convince that person that what you saw was maybe a UFO.
Let's get into what the government really knows. You've been working behind the scenes, and what are they not telling us from your perspective?
I was briefed into a program back in 1978 that revealed to me that we recovered a extraterrestrial craft in Roswell, or actually near Corona, New Mexico in 1947. A second craft was found in 1949. We found a live alien at the first craft. He stayed alive until 1952. We've had intermittent contact with extraterrestrial races ever since. And this is in 1978 that I had briefing. Wow. And so the government knows the truth. They've been deceiving the American people ever since 1947. There's been a lot happening from 1947 on till present day. The ETs are continuously visiting Earth. They're responsible for abductions, and they have an agenda. The ETs have an agenda, but you got to understand that these ETs are so advanced that it's difficult for a human to understand them and understand what their agenda is. I mean, I certainly don't know all of it. I know what I was briefed into. I know what I investigated, but I certainly don't know the whole program.
What do you think? What have you been briefed about their alien agenda?
I think there's one particular race of ETs have a common good agenda, meaning they want to make friends, they want to understand us, and they're non-hostile. But there are other races that are hostile, and that was the classical example of Reagan. Reagan was fully briefed into the program back in the 1980s when he became president in 1981. Some of that briefing has been leaked out. And one of the particular races that he was briefed on was hostile. And I think that, although I don't know for sure, but I think that led to the Strategic Defense Initiative, or Star Wars, where he wanted to protect the planet from an alien race. And he said that in a number of ways and times at different locations, at different venues. And so there is a hostile race out there, and we have to protect Earth from those the hostile ETs.
Well, when you were briefed into the crashed retrieval, did you actually see any craft at any of the bases you worked at?
Well,
can you say?
I certainly wasn't around in 1947, but
but after
the briefing. Okay, I got you. The briefings that we received were filmed, 30 whatever the millimeter films were back in those days, 16 millimeter, I believe they were. And they were old Army films, and they showed the crash retrieval. They showed Truman at the scene of Corona. They showed the ET bodies. They showed autopsies. They showed these things. And then later on, I saw pictures. I worked at Area 51. That's a known fact. It's been proven that I actually was a counterintelligence officer at Area 51, Groom Lake Complex. And I saw things fly out there that I couldn't identify as being one of ours. I saw an aircraft do things that our crafts couldn't do, and our pilots couldn't have survived if they were inside these crafts. Wow. So I knew we had crafts out there. I was never briefed into the program that Bob Lazar was talking about. I was never under 4. I was never down there. I was at the S2 complex. I know that they had classified aerial aircrafts underground out there, but I was never briefed into that program.
Well, you also told me at lunch when I met you that you actually did see an alien at one of those bases. Is that true? I mean,
That's true. I actually saw a closed circuit. There was a closed circuit television camera at a facility that I went to. I was going there on an investigation. It was out at the annex of Papoose Lake. I walked into a building. I was cleared to get into that building. I went into a room. There was an OSI agent sitting at a table watching a monitor. And on that monitor was another, with 2 people, I don't know who the 2 people were, interrogating or talking to this ET. Now, it clearly was an extraterrestrial. I asked the OSI agent, I said, what are you looking at? And he explained to me that they're interrogating this ET, and they're at such and such a building, which wasn't more than 100 feet away from where we were at. It was a different building, but it was close to where we were at. And this was a closed circuit camera.
Right.
What's interesting in this interview that I was watching is that one of the agents in that room could read the telepathic thoughts of the ET, but the other person couldn't. And so he was translating to this other agent what this ET was saying telepathically. Well, I was in there for, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes when another person came in, a higher ranking military official, and asked me for my badge. And I showed him my badge and he said, you know, you're not cleared for this room.
Oh.
So then I had to leave, but I already saw it. And I saw them and I saw the ET, and the ET was a tall gray.
A taller gray
Yes.
with a big head, big eyes.
Big head, big eyes, large head, large eyes, no ears, a small mouth, and it couldn't make any sounds. That was one of those tall grays, couldn't make the sounds, but it could communicate through telepathy.
And what was the messages that the agent who was getting the telepathy was saying was coming from the ET?
It was technical. They were trying, the little that I was understanding, they were asking this ET about some technical materials or technical information about about this craft. I wasn't there at the beginning of the conversation, so I was only there during that part of the conversation. So it was technical. He was trying to explain something about a drive, something about some kind of equipment. And I'm not a scientist, so I didn't understand it.
What you've just told us here is disclosure. You've blown the lid off here. And why does the Senate Intelligence Reports start from the beginning as if nothing you've said ever or anyone has said, Bob, just never happened? Or do they not know, or are they just trying to fool the public?
Well, let me give you an example. There's a person that is currently working DIA, and he's had contact with some of these people. I actually believe he has contact with Danny Sheehan. And he works for DIA, and he tells us, he says, the government hasn't come to me and asked me for the information that we have on ETs, because he turned around when we're talking to him on a Zoom link. He said, all these filing cabinets behind me contain information about UFOs. And if they would come to me, I would share this with him if I had the permission to give it to him. So the government is only trying to cover their tracks and still deceive the American people, because there's so much information out there. In fact, I just provided from several sources of mine, I just provided people in Washington, Senator Marco Rubio's office, with a list of all the projects, classified projects that the Air Force did pertaining to UFOs, extraterrestrial contacts from 1980 to to 1986 with
Mhm.
case numbers and detailed descriptions. We gave that to the Senate. Now, what they do from there, I don't know. Now, you got to understand that the Air Force or the government did provide a classified briefing to certain senators.
Right.
Now, they're not telling us what that briefing is, but they're telling us that it pertained to technology and technology that we have pertaining to warp drives and anti-gravity devices and things like that. But they're not telling us where that came from.
Mhm.
And,
Well-
and they didn't tell the senators that got the briefing.
So do you, I mean, this is so deep and complex. You think the Senate is just going to ignore it as if they never got anything from you and probably a lot of other people because they don't know how to deal with this because it's so complex?
Well, I think one of the things they did
Mhm.
was when and I'm not the only one doing this. There's others
Right.
doing this.
Right.
Okay. And these other, we presented information to the Senate, and what they're doing with it, they turn it over to the Air Force. They said, okay, explain this. Now
Right.
the Air Force is trying to explain, and going back, one of the particular captains, Air Force captains that was involved in the release says that he can only tell the public what other agencies within the government tells him. He
Mhm.
can't go and find this stuff on his own. So what does that tell you? There's a lot in the government that they don't want us to know about, and they're hiding it, and they'll continue to hide it.
It seems like there's, and maybe you would know this, there's been some kind of fracture inside that government whole, that there's like another force agency that's coming forward and saying, no, like Elizondo, maybe Elizondo's leading this, is saying it's time to tell the people the truth. Do you think that's what's going on?
I think it is. I think there's a lot of people within the government. I know there are. I talked to him. I just talked to a guy yesterday for 4.5 hours on the phone, and he works within NSA, and he's telling me the same thing. I just want them to come to me and ask me, because I'm going to tell them exactly what we have here. But
Well,
they're not doing that.
Whoa. They just wanted to go away. I mean, some people just wanted to go, well, why doesn't this guy come forward, become a whistleblower and say, look, you know, this is, I think Elizondo did that with Danny Sheehan. This is what I know. This is what they have. Is that possible to just come out and for someone to say that?
It's going to be up to him. It's going to be up to the individual. I mean, I don't know what, you know, he's got a career to think about. I mean, regardless of the Whistleblower Act that supposedly protects them, you're destroyed if you come out with and disclose things like that, and things that the government doesn't want you to disclose. So you know, it's up to the individual. I mean, I could try to convince him to do it, and I've tried to convince others to do it, but they're saying, you know, I got a career, I got a family, I got a wife and 2 children. I just had a baby. You know, the things like that they just don't want to, they don't want to do. And you got to understand that everything within the government pertaining to this subject is compartmented.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just because one agency, one office within the CIA knows about it, it doesn't mean that all the other offices on that floor would know about it. Same way with NSA, same way with DIA or military intelligence.
So this is huge. If this guy has a file cabinet of information, maybe going back to 47, there's probably lots of people where, how do you think, if you were in charge, proceed with opening up the files and relating this to the public? What do you think?
Well, you have to convince the executive branch. The military works for the executive branch. We have 3 equal branches of the government, civics basics, okay?
Right.
And now the Senate, the legislative branch, can only do so much. They can't order the executive branch to do anything, contrary to what that video was a few weeks ago about, well, the Senate can go in and do, the Senate can't do that. The Senate's a legislative body. And it's the same as the House of Representatives. They only have certain powers. They can ask, they can request, but if the executive branch doesn't want to turn that stuff over, they're not going to turn it over. And I actually don't believe that the president of the United States, and I'm apolitical.
Right.
I'm apolitical.
Right.
I don't believe the president of the United States has ever been briefed on it. Now, I know people are going to say, well, he was a vice president under Obama, but I just don't believe he has been. There are people, one particular very, very, very close relative of mine who works within the government, and he relates that he doesn't think that anybody's actually brought this to the president's attention. And so somebody else, and I believe it's going to be the Department of Defense, is running this show.
So they are bypassing the executive branch. It's sort of like a coup almost. They're not telling the executive branch, which makes those executive decisions, what's going on. So they don't need to confront the issue. And how do we get past this kind of, stuck moment, this impasse? I mean, that someone needs to talk to or somebody in charge. Who's in charge? Yeah. Yeah. What do you think?
I agree that somebody needs to, a real true a person with the absolute knowledge, like my friend that has the filing cabinets behind him, 6 of them full of this information. They need to come forth in some manner. But then again, the government could stop that. I mean, there's safeguards built in to highly classified special access programs, sensitive compartmental information. The document itself is controlled. The document has a cover that you can't take off that prevents it from being copied. If it's copied, it burns up. Even in a regular copier, if it's exposed to certain lights, it's going to burn up.
It actually burns up. It actually, really
compartmented, top secret compartment information. And this was back in the 80s. I know now that there are even more sophisticated measures to protect these types of documents.
Wow.
But without the documents and without the photographs are the same thing. You're not going to be able to prove anything. I can sit here and say, I saw this and this is real. But,
right.
If I had behind me in my filing cabinet, if I had something that I could show you, here's the actual document, the truth will come out. And I think if that happens, if somebody brought out and presented it, the government's going to have to follow suit.
So what about Chris Mellon? He was the Assistant Deputy of Defense under Obama. He must have had contact with Biden. Isn't he the person who, and he knows, and he's wanting to come forward? Would he be the guy to say, listen, but maybe Biden's just not ready to deal with this? What do you think about Mellon?
Chris Mellon had a great career. I don't believe, I personally, and this is coming from me, I'm only saying this, my opinion is that he's not telling the truth. He's not telling everything that he knows, because at a particular interview I saw him on television, when they asked him, he skirted that issue. What do you know? What was your access to? He skirted that issue.
Yeah.
So I think he knows. I don't know how much he knows, but I think in the position that he was in, I think he had to have known something.
Right. And maybe he's not ready to reveal that, but it comes down to the big question. We're going to say something? Because
No, go ahead.
No, the big question is why are they really hiding? If everything you're saying is true and the guy has all those filing cabinets back to 1947, and we've known, what is the big secret here? I mean, besides that they're aliens. Okay, they're alien, but what are they really hiding?
Well, it would open up a Pandora's box, an enigma within an enigma, because if the government all of a sudden says, you know what, we've lied to you since 1947. We do have a craft. We have crafts out at Area 51. We have reverse engineered things. We have the aliens have given us things such as what Colonel Corso mentioned in his book, transistors and diodes and so forth. And now we want you to believe this. No, nobody's going to believe the government at that point because they've lied to them for 70 years. They lied to the American people. Unless they come out and show us the crafts and show us the ETs that they have in captivity, then maybe they'll believe them. The American people would believe them, but they're not going to do that. They're going to be embarrassed. They don't know how to cover their tracks. There would be some type of religious, probably revolt, because there's so much of this connected to religion and then they have to explain the abductions. Right. How are they going to explain the abductions? How are they going to explain that we, the American people, we, the United States government, can't protect this 7-year-old girl from being abducted and subjected to implants and so forth and so on.
Right. So, I mean, but do you think another level, since we've been dealing with these ETs, is that the ETs themselves, at least those maybe negative ones, want to maybe even be in control and not reveal that factor? So it's not just the government, it might be ET manipulation. Is that possible?
You brought up an excellent point, Alan. Absolutely excellent.
Okay.
I'm one of the believers, and there's people out there that believe that the ETs have some sort of connection or control within our government, and not just our government. I think other governments on this planet. I think you hit that spot right there. I think the ETs have control, some control. I don't know what the controls are, but I mean, I'm not that briefed into it, and I think they're in somewhat control, and I think our government knows that they're in control, and so therefore the government doesn't want to disclose it.
So they're in control. Let's say that's true. I don't know, but if they're in control, what are they doing? What do you suspect? I mean, I know you weren't briefed in it, but what do you suspect they're in control of? What are they here for? Well,
that goes back to that statement I made earlier, is that these ETs are probably 10,000 years more advanced than we are. And it's pretty ridiculous for us trying to understand an ET, how they think or what their agenda is. We can't get into their minds. We only rely on what we know. We don't rely on our history and our values. We can't understand them. And Dr. Hal Puthoff, who's a brilliant scientist, brought this out, saying, you people want us to understand this widget that we got from the ETs. And you got to understand that this widget was made by a race that's 10,000 years more technologically advanced than we are. And now you want us to try to understand it with our science, and it just isn't going to happen.
Right. It's like giving an iPhone to a caveman, just crawling out of the cave. It's like, but there's more than one race. And some people say there are actually good races here protecting us, turning off the nuclear codes, making sure we don't blow ourselves up. What do you feel about the good versus bad aliens?
No, I think there are. I mean, I was never actually briefed into it. My own personal opinion is I was briefed into 5 different alien races. This is back in the 80s.
5 different A's. This is the one 5. In the Reagan document, right?
Yeah. This is what I was briefed in. I don't know. Maybe there are more now. I don't know. And one of those races, the Ebens, were friendly, and they were the ones that were very, very concerned about the nuclear weapons and us using nuclear weapons. And remember, all this happened. They started visiting us after we tested the nuclear weapon in New Mexico, here in New Mexico, Trinity site. And after we viciously dropped 2 atomic bombs in Japan in 1945 that killed, 1,000, well, over the years, 800, 900,000 people, and maimed them. Oh, and I think after that, they even started visiting us. Wow, trying to figure out, why are we doing this? Why are we destroying our planet? Why are we killing our own people? Right. And I think that's one of the reasons. There's been some great books written about the connection between UFOs and nuclear weapons. Robert Hastings, who I personally don't get along with, but he wrote a really great book about it, about the sightings over nuclear missile sites in Montana and other locations around the United States.
So maybe, I don't know, I'm just sort of surmising that maybe the ETs that were in control of the government are sort of maybe losing their grip on it, and these other beings are coming, and because there seems to be more mass sightings around the world, and there's a shift in consciousness. Do you believe something like that might be going on?
That's very possible. And what the general public doesn't know, and I just learned this last night. I told you I talked 4 hours with a friend who's still within the government, works for NSA. He says the public only knows a fraction of the sightings and the contacts that Earth is having right now. The government, the United States government, NSA, NRO, and the other agencies, they know the real dangers because they're seeing all the different incidents of UFOs penetrating radar, penetrating classified storage areas, possibly this. I don't want to go into great details because I don't know a whole lot about it.
Right.
But the U.S. government just located. They believe they located a alien base 500 miles south. I believe it was southeast of Hawaii.
In the ocean, you mean? In the ocean?
In the ocean, there's a huge complex there underground. It's like 5,000 feet. Or I don't know exact depth, but it's quite deep. And there's a complex, an entire complex down there that was photographed by I believe it was a Navy or a National Oceanic Administration ship.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're trying to figure out what it is.
So would you say there's like one person or a group, maybe it was Majestic at one point, that, they get this UFO information and they keep it very tight behind those locked vaults? Who would that be? Or you think, who is behind this?
Yeah. Well, Truman was involved with trying to investigate everything. And this is the early stages of our intelligence service. And the CIA just came into existence in 47, the National Security Act, and actually not until 1948. The Air Force just came into existence. There were so many things that weren't organized properly back in those days, and they were doing the best they could. But I believe the Air Force wanted to run with this program and wanted to do more. But I think the Central Intelligence Agency, I've talked to agents who retired that worked for them. They were convinced that what these UFOs actually were Russian or Soviets back then. And they had to be totally convinced that no, it's not. These things are coming from outer space. Mm-hmm. And we didn't know that until the late 50s and early 60s when we started launching satellites. We couldn't see them except with Earth-based telescopes. We couldn't see these things out there. Now we can. We have satellites. We have things. We can. We are trying to protect Earth nowadays. Back then we couldn't. So it wasn't organized. To answer your question, it wasn't organized. There were too many people trying to run things, and and somebody let it drop.
No, but now it's organized. Someone in the military, there's F-16s following the Stevensville craft. And then, so that goes somewhere. Someone is making the decision to keep that under lock and key, right? Who are those people now making those decisions?
Well, I believe it's the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA. When the Air Force closed Project Blue Book in 1969 after the Condom Report, the Air Force had all this information. All these files, all this information. And now they're asking some government agency, who wants this? Well, DIA raised their hand and said, we'll take it. Number one, because DIA was a relatively new agency. They came in existence in 1961. And now DIA has to have a mission. They want to have a mission. Oh, we'll take it. And I believe, I know for a fact they got the treasure house the clearinghouse, so to speak, of information on UFOs.
Mhm.
What they did with it after that, and I know about the DIA's involvement up to 1993. I don't know who has it now today, but somebody has to be in control. There was an MJ-12 back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, up to the 80s. There still is some entity, maybe it's not called MJ-12, but there's some entity that's controlling this, but I don't know who it is.
You think the DIA might be in conflict with aspects of the Pentagon and the Navy in particular, and Fravor, who's come forward, and the UAP task force? It seems like there's this tug of war going on. And that's why they discredited Elizondo, saying, no, he never worked for ATIP. Do you think that's going on the deeper levels? There's this battle?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there definitely is. And people that still work within the government are saying that right now. I mean, they're telling their senators the same exact thing that you just said, is that there's a fight, there's a feud between my not just necessarily one agency and another agency, but inside that agency, within DIA, there's a feud going on between one particular section and another section. The Air Force is the same way. I mean, there's a really, really big feud right now in the Air Force over the Space Force. And the Air Force doesn't want to give the Space Force everything that they have, but under the act that created the Space Force, the Air Force has to give them all of it. So there's a feud between a number of different agencies and military branches.
Was the Space Force created for alien interactions or for another reason, you think?
I believe so, because if there was a good article on the internet some time ago, a couple years ago, when Space Force was first proposed. Well, it wasn't proposed then. It was proposed back in the 80s. Reagan, Defense Secretary Weinberger, proposed the Space Force. He had it all planned. The Air Force, there were two Air Force generals, one who was on TV not too long ago, that said, yeah, we proposed it back in 79, 81, sometime back there. But Congress wouldn't go along with it. And then again, even under the Clinton administration, the Bush administration, first Bush administration, they wanted to create it. Under Bob Gates, he was the Secretary of Defense. No, and somehow it was stopped. Eventually under Trump, and I don't know how Trump got it in there. Remember, I'm apolitical, but I don't know how Trump got it in there, but it was created under Trump and bought off by Congress.
How come you're allowed to talk about this now? You just revealed, a dozen secrets that no one has ever said who's come forward recently. So why?
Well, I never read anything that I'm talking about right now in any kind of government documents. I'm just telling you what other people have told me. I can't be prosecuted for that. If people do actual good searches on the internet, they can find out a lot of the stuff that I'm just talking about. Mm-hmm. So it's not classified. If it is classified, and somebody comes to me and says, you know what you just told me was what you just said on Alan's show is classified. Okay, I'll shut my mouth. But I don't know that. I don't know that it's classified. Everything that I had access to back in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, I signed a security oath. And, I presented that security oath. I showed people that security oath. It was on my website until my website was hacked. And it's over with. Right. After 2003, I can talk about anything. That's really what the security oath says. Yeah. A non-disclosure agreement says October 1st of 2003, that it ceases to exist after that. There's a lot of things that I know. Really, really things that I know that I won't talk about because, I don't want the Russians or the Chinese to get any of this information. But there's a lot of things that I'll talk about when the government starts lying and says, no, that's not right, when I know that it is right. I know the UFOs have been here. I know they're a danger. I know they've abducted people. those things American people should know about.
If American people know about that, do you think it should come out like at a Senate Intelligence Committee with the president, vice president there saying, okay, we're laying it all out on the table. This is what we know. And then we deal with it. Eventually the truth, yeah, it might be an embarrassment, but the truth, usually comes out, and it's usually hard for people to say who've been covering up, but that seems like the only way to go.
Well, the truth shall set you free, as
Right.
the CIA will say.
But it'll cut you off first. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I think that would be a great way of disclosing. But then again, the government can't disclose everything. If we're developing some kind of secret weapon or secret aircraft, which I know we have, and we got it from the ETs, and we suddenly disclose everything that we got, it's going to open up, like I said earlier, a Pandora's box. And I don't think that will ever happen. I think the only way it's going to happen is if somebody like Danny takes this all the way to a court, where a judge or the U.S. Supreme Court forces the government to release. And then again, you got the problem of equal branches of the government, whereby the Supreme Court can't order the executive branch to release something that the executive branch knows that is classified. I mean, there's so many other Pandora boxes that will prevent that from happening. But I think Danny's on the right foot right now, and I hope Danny continues his quest and for this disclosure.
This is Danny Sheehan we're talking about, who is Luis Elizondo's lawyer. You just wrote a book. We'll close up soon, but you just wrote a book that you had to submit before you could get it published, and they redacted it, 300 pages in it, right?
Now, see, this is another proof that UFOs are real, because in my book, I had 700 and some pages that wrote the book. The manuscript was 700 some pages. And when I submitted to the government for review, they classified 374 pages, all pertaining to UFO stuff. Now, wow. If the UFOs weren't real, why would the government classify this stuff?
What was the most important thing in that book that you could tell us now that was redacted? Because you said you could talk about it, but you can't write about it. What was that? What was in there?
About an incident that happened that I was involved with peripherally, involving a landing of a craft, a ET craft, and the exchange of information with the United States government and a Vatican representative. That was there's not one word of that the government will allow me to print.
What
I
year
even tried to rewrite it.
What year was that? Do you know?
That was in I can't even tell. Well, it was in the 1990s.
Okay, I thought it might have been the Gordon Cooper incident but that wasn't the Edwards Air Force Base landing.
No, it wasn't.
Richard, this has been a revelation, and you coming from inside the government. Thank you for opening up to what the truth is. And if you could say it here, I think the more you talk about this, the more people will get this is a real phenomenon, that definitely the government knows more. Anything you'd like to leave us with before you? Well,
I'd like to thank Danny Sheehan and his team that is working on this disclosure project. I think the best chance that we have, American people and the UFO community have, for a full disclosure or even a partial disclosure is with Danny's efforts.
Great. And would you be willing to talk in front of Congress about everything you know if you were called?
I've already been in contact with Senator Rubio's office. They called me. I've talked to him. I sent him things. I told him I would. Yes, absolutely.
So he's just like trying to decide how you're going to tell the public all this stuff. Is that what you think is going on with Rubio?
Yeah, his hands are tied. He can only ask the government for the information.
But he is the government. Who's the government? When you say ask the government, who do you mean by the government?
You mean he has to ask the executive branch. He's the legislative branch. He has to ask the executive branch the US military for the information, everything they have. Well, the government is never going to give them everything they have. One of his aides told me that flatly. He said, a government, somebody within, I don't know which agency, said, there's no way in the world you're going to get all of it.
Why? Why don't they? Because is it corporate controlled somehow? The technology is, but you don't know.
Well, that's another. I mean, that's another
a whole other
4 hours of
Yeah.
talking about. Yeah, there's Skunk Works,
Yeah.
Lockheed Skunk Works that have a proprietary. That's another Pandora's box.
Well, we'll go there. I'll do another interview with you on my ET roundtable. Okay, Richard?
Okay, Alan.
Thanks so much for your time. This has been really valuable. Neil, you want to come on? Because I think we just got disclosure here. How did you like what you heard? I mean, wasn't that, I thought it was pretty amazing.
A lot of great information. Thank you, Richard, for showing up and, just sharing your time with us, and just definitely admitting and owning the past, and then coming forward to really to bring some light and shed some light on what's been happening, and helping us validate what we've known to be kind of a reality for some time, but it wasn't really validated on that level from anybody that was in the government or something like that. So you really allowed us to have more of this confirmation. So thank you so much, brother.
You're very welcome.
Richard Doty, ladies and gentlemen, inside the government. I mean, incredible. And talk to your friend about releasing that files.
I just want to say to everybody, because you're right, there was a lot of controversy in the chat room, and I was just reading them all, and there's comments all over the place in regards to having Richard on. And we all have our, have our past, and sometimes people shift, and they, like Richard, for example, he shifted, and now he's coming out to explain a lot of information of what had happened. But it's also important to use your own discernment and realize that people come from their own backgrounds, right? So if somebody's, for example, somebody's in the military, they have an awakening and they want to tell people the truth. They also have a background that might be military based, and they have certain belief systems that come from that. So it doesn't mean that because that's their foundational belief system that they're part of some cabal. It means that was their upbringing and their education was in this. Therefore, they're going to come from that platform. So it's important to use your discernment, but also to extract what pieces of information fit within what you're trying to figure out, right? Instead of just throwing everything out. And that's what's happening here with these conversations, is we're attempting to explore these and talk to individuals that usually wouldn't be on these platforms, right? So that we can ask some questions and try to see what really has happened.
I mean, I think it's important for people like Richard, who were inside the government, to come forward. He doesn't seem to have an agenda now. I don't think he's working for anyone. He's just trying to talk about what he knows. And it seems like he really is for full disclosure. I think that's what's sincere.
Right. Yeah. All the information that he gave in regards to ET races and, and what was retracted from his book and all that, that's kind of pretty groundbreaking right there, I would say.